Hi, you're listening to Burn Beautiful, a podcast for women ready to step into their divine feminine leadership so they can create a life of joy, health, and impact beyond their wildest dreams. Here, you'll learn how to heal stress from the inside out, reclaim your vibrant health, and master your energy so you can lead powerfully without burning out and actually enjoy the moments that matter most in this one beautiful and precious life. I'm Nicole Whitaker, burnout and leadership coach, founder of Lead Up Health, and creator of the HERS method. Welcome. Hello, welcome back to Burn Beautiful. My name is Nicole. I'm a transformation speaker, coach, and facilitator, and the founder of Lead Up Health. And I am so happy you are here. Happy 2026 if you're listening to this at the beginning of the year. If you've ever started a year like really motivated and then found yourself a few months later back in the same old patterns, but you want to do it differently this year, then this episode is for you. I have got you. This is the third and final conversation in a series designed to set you up for your absolute best year yet. With the first one really setting you up to take a clear and compassionate look back at the past year. As every good strategy session begins with an understanding of where things currently stand. And then the second, the most recent before this, is really focused on helping you to get crystal clear on what you know you really want. Not what you think you should want, not what your partner wants, not what you've been programmed to want, but what you want. Because freedom is the ability to choose the life you want for yourself without the confines of programming, conditioning, or shoulds. So if you are still trying to figure out, or what do I really want? Or if you're like, I don't know if that goal is really speaking to me or inspiring me, I highly recommend that before you listen to this episode, you go back and check out the previous episode. Because if you're not headed in that right direction that feels aligned in your mind, heart, and in your gut, then it doesn't really matter how quickly or how well you achieve it, right? You want one that's going to leave you happier, more alive, and more you. So I'm assuming that we're there. You know what you really want, and you want to focus on how to get there, right? Or how to actually make your goals a reality once you have them. And that's what we're going to do today. Because there is a lot here, I've split this conversation into two parts. So today is really part one, which is where we're going to talk about how to actually make your goals a reality by designing what I call conditions for success. It is a critical and overlooked step if you want to actually meet those goals you have put forward for yourself. And in part two, we're going to take it a layer deeper where we talk about your nervous system, your identity, your beliefs, because that being or who you are, that being ultimately determines whether what you're doing or those habits you're trying to achieve, those goals you're trying to accomplish actually sticks. So conditions for success in your state of being are two critical ingredients that really determine whether or not you're going to actually arrive at your goals. Yet what's interesting is the average person this time of year, and I am guilty of this as well, jumps straight into doing, right? We're like, oh, let me just jump into eating differently, exercising, time blocking my calendar. And initially it's great, right? We're like, we're doing it, we're feeling great. But fast forward a few months from now and it doesn't stick. And there are a few reasons why it doesn't stick. The first is that if you've created a goal that only focuses on the behavior, don't eat sugary snacks, exercise 4 times a week, you might be missing the root cause of the behavior. So if you're snacking on something sugary every day around 3 p.m., it might be because you're stressed. It might be because it's a good way to avoid that task in front of you or to decompress from that conversation with your boss. It might be blood sugar instability, right? But without thinking about that root cause, if your solution isn't aimed at the root cause, it's not necessarily going to set you up for success. Another big reason why goals can fall apart is because, quite frankly, stress and busyness of daily life just take over, right? We have said, oh, we're not going to work after our kids go down, but work tasks are flying at us. And there we are saying, okay, just this once, I'm going to pull out my laptop just this once when the kids are in bed, even though we vowed to be done with this, right? Many of us are living in a pressure cooker. And when we're stressed, it can be almost impossible to make sustainable change because we don't have the energy, we don't have the capacity, and change takes energy and capacity. And then the third is that change can be scary, even when it's good, right? Whether we like to admit it or not, it is scary and uncomfortable to change, even if we know the change is ultimately going to be good for ourselves. So, for example, we'll take what we've been talking about losing weight and working less. Well, it's what we've known our entire lives, likely, right? And to be clear, that weight, that constant working is actually protecting us from something, right? For me, when I reach for that 3 p.m. snack, it's because I'm stressed and I'm self comforting, right? I'm protecting myself from a feeling of discomfort, whether that's facing my feelings or, soothing an emptiness or avoiding work that I should be doing. Same with busyness, by the way, staying busy all the time, right? And so what happens is that we can have this inner tension then between what our conscious mind wants, right? Yes, I want to work less. Yes, I want to lose the weight. I want to eat healthier. But our subconscious mind, which mind you is 95% of our thinking is subconscious, whether we're aware of it or not, it's wired for survival and it is emotionally driven. And it's saying, nope, nope, stay in that same old pattern, right? That'll keep you safe. For example, someone that I used to work with, she had a huge job, big salary, but on top of that, she was working multiple part-time jobs for more money. And she hated that she was constantly stressed. She actually, a big aspect of her health was really falling apart. And she knew it was coming from the stress. But when we talked about quitting the part-time jobs, she was like, well, what would I do with my time? I don't even know what it's like. That's a different way of living and I don't know it. Right. And that can be scary, understandably so. And so it's this inner tension between logical desires and emotional desires, between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind that often puts us right back in square one, despite our absolute best efforts. Because quite frankly, it's easier to keep suffering rather than doing something unfamiliar, right? And so when we focus on just the behavior, right? Eat better, exercise 4 times a week, stop raising my voice with my kids, be more loving toward my husband or whatever, it doesn't stick. It's going to look like a strong start, but it might have some ups and downs with some self berating in between, and then a fizzling out, and then a sense of resignment or a feeling of failure, right? Been there, done that. And I have learned a different way to set and meet goals, which is a true game changer. And I can say with confidence that when I set myself up for success, the way I'm going to share with you today, I meet my goals and you will too. And so as we talk today, let's both remember that the trick isn't waiting for the fear to go away or waiting until we feel 100% prepared, right? That time is never going to come. It's about doing it anyways. The trick also is not about doing it perfectly. You will fall off, right? You will miss a day of exercise. You will reach for that snack or whatever it is. The trick is going for it anyways and knowing that you're bigger than that fear. You're ready just as you are right now. And it's about getting back on when you fall off time and time again. And I'm going to show you how to do this. So let's get started. So, the overall equation for a strong goal is conditions for success plus your way of being, and then the doing honestly just comes. Before starting Lead Up Health, I was in educational leadership, and a part of my job would be to go on these school visits and observe classrooms. And almost every classroom that I would visit would have what we would call a BHAG or a big, hairy, audacious goal, all of them for their students. And typically they were posted on the wall, like 80% mastery of grade level standards, for example. And almost every single classroom had, in addition to that goal, some sort of lesson or activity somewhat related to that goal. But I will tell you that within 5 minutes of observing that classroom, I could tell whether the teacher would be able to lead those students to actually meeting those goals or not. So the takeaway for this part is that it's not about the goal. They all had goals. And that's why in the previous episode about what you want, I shared, I don't care about the format of your goals. It's not really about that. So there are three things that the successful classrooms had in common that helped me know, oh, these students, yes, they are going to meet the goals of this course. It's the same three things that will make achieving any goal. So, first, the conditions of success were in place. This means a few things. It meant that the school leader had their back, right? They protected their teacher time, they developed them, they made sure that the teachers got coached, and there were school-wide systems in place, right? Things like making sure that students were in their classrooms and the halls were cleared when the bell rang, for example. Second, the classroom, I would walk in and it would just vibe with high expectations and purpose. And this would be from what they had on their walls to how the teacher was interacting with their students, right? They had a personal relationship with each of the students, gave them challenging assignments that said, I believe in you, you can do this. They gave them direct feedback. They taught them about malleable intelligence, right? They fostered community and belief in themselves and in each other. So it wasn't just about this 80% mastery goal. It was about 80% mastery so that I can get into the college of my choice or so that I can construct an argument and advocate for what's important to me. The third thing is that all students were working towards this goal at any given moment. I mean, airtight down to the second. The teachers had an airtight plan that accounted for every single minute. They had seamless structures, whether it was how to pass back papers efficiently or how to check for understanding, student understanding. And I share this with you because we can learn from this. It's not about the goal. Again, all classrooms had a goal. It's not saying I will lose 10 pounds by May. That means nothing on its own. It's also not just focusing on the doing. So it's not just saying I will not eat any sugar or I will exercise 4 times a week, because again, that doesn't address the root. So what does work? Here's the formula for success for meeting your goal: conditions for success plus being plus doing. So hopefully you heard that in that story that I shared of the classroom. Those were the three pieces that they really had in place. So let's go through each of these categories so you can set yourself up for success with your goals this year, because believing this year will be different is a trap unless you do it differently. So let's do it differently together. So, today we're going to focus on how you can create the right conditions for success so that your goals and meeting those goals, just it's inevitable. And we have to start here because conditions for success, it's the context or the environment that is going to make change possible. So, it's similar to the soil that a plant's in, right? If you think about a plant, if a plant isn't in fertile soil, right? If it doesn't have the right nutrients, the plant's not going to grow. In the same way, if you do not have the right conditions in place, you will either not meet your goals or you're going to exhaust and deplete yourself in the name of trying to meet them. Neither of those are what we want for you. So, before we jump into it, I do want to address a few common pitfalls around this. So, one, what I'm not saying is that we need to over prepare or over plan. Now, if you have perfectionistic tendencies, first of all, welcome to the club. I can relate. You might fall into this trap, right? We do still want to have a bias towards action and imperfect action at that. It's going to move you along a lot faster than waiting for the perfect time or the perfect plan. But that doesn't mean not creating conditions for success. This is also not about over preparing and getting all the supplies. So, a brief story about this, and I'm sharing this knowing my husband would be okay with it. A few years back, my husband decided he was going to do yoga. And I'm a yogi myself, a certified instructor, and I was pumped. And so, the day after he decided, he bought like literally every single piece of yoga equipment out there, including things I had never seen before as a yoga certified yoga instructor, like these weird sliders. And then his yoga phase stopped in a week. So, this is an example of over preparing in one area, but either not checking to be sure it was what really you really want. So, see past episode, or under preparing in some other areas. So there are actually four aspects of condition of success that we're going to go through today that is going to set you up for inevitable success, inevitably meeting those goals. And those four are: first, garnering the support that you need. Second, planning your habits and plan for disruption. The third is setting up your environment specifically with the right systems and structures and routines. And the fourth, and potentially my favorite, is shrinking the change or making it just really easy to implement these habits. So let's go step by step through these. So let's dig into garnering the support that you need. And this is primarily relational because if you try to make a change in a vacuum by yourself, which if you are a strong, independent woman, Lord knows we try to go it alone, you're going to end up burned out, right? I know this from experience. If you're prone to over responsibility or thinking I can handle this all on my own, this is a really, really important one because you are not meant to do it on your own. None of us are. So this looks like letting the people in your circle know, your partner, your kids, your coworker, your friends, what you're doing and why it's important to you. And most importantly, how they can support you, how they can help. So the first hurdle with this is internal, right? Knowing, oh, I am not meant to go it alone. It is okay to ask for help. The second piece is actually getting the help that you need. And this isn't always straightforward. So I can tell you about 6 years ago when I had, three in diapers and I was like, I've got to start doing something for myself. I've got to start exercising again. It wasn't a one and done conversation with my husband. I had to have multiple conversations with him, and we had to both kind of figure out logistically, well, what could that look like in the morning? But also, I had to make sure it felt good to him too, right? I had to figure out how could I support him in turn. But it's so worth it. And now we have a system 6 years later that has evolved multiple times, but it feels great for both of us. And it has allowed me to still connect with my kids in the morning and meditate and exercise before the workday starts, right? This is possible. And it starts with a conversation. And this goes beyond your partner. For example, if you don't want to open your laptop after you put your kids down this year, you've got to set those expectations for your colleagues and your boss. Without clarity and communication, it's just not going to stick. So again, there's that internal piece of realizing it's okay, right? This is something we're not meant to be working 24/7. You could do it, but it's not what you want to do. And that's okay. And then having those conversations. Um, and sometimes I'll just name this means getting a more formal type of support, right? This is where a coach comes a long way. I know for me, when I'm doing something for the first time, I seek out a coach, someone who's an expert, but who can see things I can't see in myself, and who can help me with that accountability piece. And I know women who come to me wanting to improve their health and their impact at work, they don't have time to waste, right? So someone with expertise who can coach you can make all of the difference. Now, if any of what I just shared makes you feel anxious, like I just no, I could never. I want you to hang tight for the next episode, which is about being. And I want you to go back to listen to what do you really want? Because it might be that you're not crystal clear on what is most important to you, or it's not pulling you forward enough yet. The second piece is to plan for the habits. So you may have heard the quote, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So this right here is why I don't really think it's that important what your goal is written to be, right? Whether it's an intention or a SMART goal, because what really matters are the daily habits that you put in place to reach that goal, right? Someone who says, lose 10 pounds in May, but don't have the daily habits in place, they're not going to get there versus someone who just says, oh, I want to get healthier, but they have the habits in place consistently, well, we already know which one is going to get further faster. Um, so, what I'd encourage here is actually a pretty precise and pretty specific plan because it's going to do two things. It is going to take the decision making and the guesswork out of doing it. And therefore, it's going to take less time and less energy out of your day. And the second piece is it's going to make it easier to pivot and get back on track when you are thrown off track because we're going to get thrown off track. It's just life. So, tips for making a specific plan. Um, Fit it into an already existing routine. For example, after I drink my morning coffee and before I send the kids off to school, I exercise. This is called habit stacking. It's when you already have habits in place and you put something right next to it, it makes it a lot easier to start integrating and to do again and again and again. The second piece to planning for this is to map it all out with both specificity and flexibility. And so here's what I mean by that. I don't just say, I'm going to exercise in the morning. I say, I'm going to do 20 to 30-minute weightlifting mornings, and arms, legs, and a full body. I'm going to do one cycling morning and one yoga morning. Because if I don't name specifically what it is that I'm doing, I'm waking up being like, okay, what should I do? I mean, there's too many decisions. Now, what I don't do is say, okay, on Monday I'm doing this, on Tuesday I'm doing this, because I need a bit of flexibility. I might have a crappy night's sleep. Things might have gone a little awry in the morning and I might have 20 minutes instead of 30. And so that way I have specificity, but I also have flexibility to feel into what makes sense for what's come my way that morning and how I feel in my body. So you want to ask yourself, and I'm using the exercise health example just because it's simple, but you can do this with any goal. So you just want to ask yourself, what plan do you have? And how can you be specific enough to make the decision making out of it, but flexible enough so that you can kind of flow a little bit depending on what your day is shaping out to look like or how you're feeling. Another example is don't just say, I'm going to eat a high protein breakfast. Say, I'm going to have this or this, overnight oats or a protein smoothie, right? It takes the decision making out of it. And a pro tip that I have, what I love to do is I write mine out on the back of an index card in just little bullets. And I like it because in my mind, I'm like, if it doesn't fit on the back of an index card, it might be too much. But if you don't fill the back of an index card, it might not be specific enough. And then the final piece of this planning part is make a plan for when things go awry because it's going to happen, right? The kids are going to get sick. You might have a crappy night's sleep. Work might be especially busy as you wrap up a project. The only thing that is guaranteed is that something will happen. And so you want to have a plan for what you're going to do when it does. In his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear recommends that you never miss more than a day. Now, as a working mom, this is sometimes, quite frankly, impossible. You know how it goes. Like one kid gets sick, they're out for a couple days. Then guess what? Then their sister gets sick, and on it goes, right? But I do always have a plan to get back on track as soon as I can. And here's the other key is that I don't have to beat myself up about it, right? Because I know I have planned for things to go imperfectly, and I know I'm going to get right back to it. So we've talked about getting your support system, your support people in place. We've talked about creating a plan for yourself that's flexible and specific and helps you know what to do when you fall off. The third piece is really about setting up your external environment so that you're supported no matter where you turn. And there are a few pieces to this. The first is visual cues. So this is things like shoes in the doorway. For me, my Peloton is in my bedroom. So I wake up and I see it every morning. It's post-it notes of encouragement to yourself on your computer, on your mirror, that reminds you of who you are, that you can do it, and why you're going after these goals. I have mine, I like intention words. I have mine right here to remember what it is that I'm harnessing this year on my computer. Um, this, most importantly, though, looks like setting up systems and structures or routines. So, for example, a goal that I have for myself this year is to expand Lead Up Health, but not expand my working hours, right? So, this means I need to be even more purposeful with my time. Now, what I don't know is exactly what's going to come my way each week. So, I've got to put a system in place to account for that. And so I built out my calendar to include at the beginning of every week a 30-minute planning out my week with my intention, my top two priorities, my calendar. I've also included an end of week 30 minutes where I reflect on what worked, what didn't, and looking forward and tweaking. I also have that at the start of every single day. I also have built in time cues to remind myself to build in time for when I'm going to learn and develop myself. Because in the end, this is what's going to make me more efficient and effective, right? I'm going to batch my time in certain ways. And so these systems are going to enable me to meet the goal. Um, and so you want to ask yourself, what are some systems or structures I can put in place? What are some routines that I can put in place that if I do this, it's going to automatically set myself up for success? Going back to the classroom example, right? The teachers who thought through, okay, well, this is how we're going to pass back papers so we don't waste time. This is how they're going to enter the classroom. That way, every single minute is really purposeful and accounted for. So, the fourth and final component of creating these conditions for success is to quote unquote shrink the change. And if you've ever read Switch, written by Dan and Chip Healy, they talk about this concept of shrink the change, which is another way of saying making those habits. They're going to get you to your goal so easy or so fun that it's almost hard not to do the habits. So in the book, they give this great example of I think it was their kids who were always playing with these car toys and leaving them out, not putting them away, and nagging and all these things. It just wasn't working. And so one day they decided to create this on ramp, this like car ramp into the bin where the car toys belong. And so the kids, all of a sudden, this cleaning up became easy. They turned something that was a chore into something that was low stress and even fun, right? They would zoom those cars up and into the box. And this is so important when it comes to our habits and their corresponding goals. Because if those goals that you have laid out feel too big or heavy or intimidating, it's just going to stress you out and it's going to lead to procrastinating or overthinking or overplanning or ultimately burning out, because basically staying in our comfort zone, right, or letting the emotional brain or subconscious brain take over is going to keep us right where we are if we're overstressed. Okay, so how do you shrink the change for your specific habits and your goals? The first question I want you to ask yourself is, what is the minimum viable version of the habit? In other words, what is the least amount of work you can do to still get the results that you want? So, sticking with that health bucket as an example, you might not need an entirely new diet, right? You might just need to stop mindlessly snacking while you're packing your kids' lunches, like a friend of mine. Just kidding, like myself. You might need a midday walk instead of an entirely new exercise routine, right? So that you're not sitting all day. So what is the very precise or small thing that is going to get you that change, and focus on that? Because it's likely not going to be a revamp. The second thing that you want to ask yourself is, what is a first step you can take that feels safe but doable? Right? Maybe right now, instead of saying, oh, I'm not going to pull my laptop out at all after the kids are asleep, you say, okay, I'm going to pull it out, but it's only going to be 30 minutes. And the next week, it's going to be 20 minutes. and you cut it down week by week. But whatever it is, I want you to try it on for size. Like, okay, I'm going to do this and see how it feels in your body. Because again, if that feeling of safety isn't there, like, yeah, I can do this, right? The emotional brain might take over, or we might end up burned out. And you just remember, you can always adjust, right? Life is just one big experiment. So we can try things on for size. And if it doesn't work, we can try something different the next day or the next minute. And finally, you can ask yourself, how can I make it fun, right? Are you going to treat yourself to your favorite coffee drink while you finally start writing that novel you've been promising yourself or working on that project you've been avoiding? Are you going to listen to your favorite music while you exercise? Right? This piece really is not about lowering the standards. It's about lowering the entry bar and meeting yourself right where you are. And then you can up the ante. So the bottom line here is that it's more important that you're headed in the right direction instead of going fast. And it's more important to do something consistently instead of going full throttle only to burn out and stop. And the way to do this is to create these conditions for success. So as we close out, let's recap. The first essential step to meeting your goals this year is to create conditions for success, right? That's like the soil, the sun, the air that a plant needs to even take root. And those 4 conditions for success are: 1, get your people to support you. Ask for the support that you need. 2, plan out your habits, plan for disruption. Make sure that those plans are specific enough that it removes having to make decisions and thinking about it, but flexible enough that you can respond to what's happening in your body and around you. 3, set up your environment with visual cues, encouragement, with the right systems and structures. 4, shrink the change, right? Make it easy, make it so that your system, your nervous system feels safe to begin. Because when you have the right support, the right systems and structures, things flow. So going back to that classroom example, right? When the teachers had the support of our principal that blocked and tackled so they could focus on teaching. When the teachers had a clear lesson plan and had simple systems and structures and routines. This is how you enter the class. It's how you pass back papers. This is what you do. There is less chaos, less energy that goes into making decisions, and learning can flow with ease. It's the exact same when you create these conditions for success in your life to support you in your goals, right? Consider a river. Without the structure of the banks, that river is not going to flow. In the same way, when you have a plan, when you've got systems in place, you've got support, the more freedom and flow and ease you can create in your life. Systems and structures create ease and flow. But there is another layer to this. And honestly, it's the layer that most people never get taught. I most certainly was not until I took it upon myself to build this knowledge later in life. Because you can have great systems, you can have a great plan, you can have the calendar, the habits, the environment, and still find yourself self-sabotaging. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about the root system under all of this. It's the yin to the yang of doing, which is your state of being. That is your nervous system, your identity, your beliefs, just like the roots of a tree determine the size and the health of that tree. It is your state of being that ultimately determines whether any of this is going to stick. So if this episode was about the sun, water, and soil, the next one is about the roots. And that's where real lasting change actually comes from. And if you're ready to make this your year, your best year yet, and you want some support, I do have just a couple of one-on-one coaching slots still available. If you want to see if that's a fit for you, you can sign up for a free consultation at www.leaduphealth.com. Can't wait to see you at our next episode where we're talking about the roots for sustainable change. Until next time, burn beautiful loves. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode sparked something in you, subscribe, and I'd be so grateful if you take a moment to rate and review the show. It is the most powerful way to help other women find it. And if you know someone who is struggling or on the edge of burnout or simply wants to lean from wholeness, send this their way. Let's grow this movement together. To get exclusive insights, tools, and behind-the-scenes support, join the HERS Insider List at www.leaduphealth.com. And if you're ready to explore working together, whether through coaching or consulting, you can book a free consultation right from the site. Until next time, burn beautiful loves.